Gentlemen, let's go back to February 2025, or maybe slightly before. Bobby Karalla, Tim Cato, joined by Christian Clark of The Athletic. This was Christian's first year on the Mavs beat. Spent a lot of years in the NBA before this, but have probably never encountered anything quite like what happened in February whenever the Mavericks shocked the world by trading Luka Dončić to the Lakers. Now, we're not going to relitigate the trade and all of that stuff, but
unless you want to.
Unless you want to. But as someone that was covering it, and, Tim, you wrote a lot of stories about what went into that decision and the fallout and all that stuff. But Christian, you guys at The Athletic, both you and the team of writers there, did a lot of reporting around then too. What was it like for you to take over the beat at that moment in time and to go through everything that happened? And what are some of the the things that really stand out in your memory?
And to take it out, like expecting to be a Luka beat writer.
Yeah.
Of course, anytime you take one of these jobs, you're like, well, is there going to be interest? And it's like, well, they have Luka, so yeah, there's definitely going to be interest. I mean, my first day was December 9th. I watched him play 4 times in a Mavericks uniform before he got moved. So
4 times.
How was it?
It was pretty good. One of the things I was bringing up a lot during the season, they were like, 19-11 going into Christmas. I think they were top 11 in offense and defense. Like on paper, you're like, okay, this I like Oklahoma City come out of the West, but they could maybe be a contender. That's how I was feeling going into Christmas. I was like, they're good. They have the makings of maybe a contender.
Like, did you take the job with visions like, maybe I'll end up in Slovenia? Maybe maybe there's a flight to Ljubljana at
go on a world tour.
Future.
No, you did the Ljubljana flight and
Fair.
story,
very long
which
flight.
was a good one. But no, I mean, like the thing I'll probably remember most is just that moment of terror. Like I was on the road trip with the team, when Luka was traded. I was in a hotel room in Cleveland, and the trade deadline was a couple days away, and I'd filed a post that day like, here's some backup centers, here's some 3s and 4s, like maybe they could look at, solid 1,000 words, pretty boring list. And then I was going to bed and, just get woken up by barrage of calls and texts, a little after midnight on Eastern time, like, oh my God, this is real. I mean, I literally thought I was having a nightmare. Like it took me a second to realize like, this is real. I was one of the many people who was like, this is real,
Yeah. Did you, did that piece ever run?
Which one?
The trade
trade deadline
piece?
primer?
You filed it that night.
It
and
never saw
ran?
the light of day.
Yeah.
It was going to go live the next morning. That never went live.
Yeah,
and
sometimes that's how it plays out. So you were at the Cleveland press conference?
Yeah, I got to go to that.
What was it like being there in person? It starts off with a joke that every YouTube video you can find of it is now clipped like that. That's not there any longer. And like, what were the vibes as you recall them in that room?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jason Kidd looked very nervous. That's something I'll kind of remember. I think WFAA did they had a body language expert do like a 20-minute video of like how uncomfortable Jason Kidd looked, and I watched that entire 20-minute video.
I like body language analysis.
Yeah. I watched a body language doctor break that down. Look, I think that was just like the thing I'll remember is that was not handled well from a public relations perspective. Like leading with the joke, like gallows humor. Like I think they'll look at that in like public relations courses and be like, this is not how you handle a crisis. Like my note, if I was a PR professional for the people who had to explain that one, is like, you need to go in there and like act like this is a funeral, because this is a funeral for your fans. Like you might have had reasons to trade Luka, and like, I think their thought process was, all right, we got to give this guy like hundreds of millions of dollars this summer, devote 35% of the salary cap. We don't like believe the conditioning stuff is going to improve. We feel like the injury stuff is going to get worse. Like, I don't necessarily agree with all that, but I can see how they were in that headspace. But, the way it was explained, I thought that was like just not handled well at all.
Yeah, it's just very clear they did not understand the gravity, which is something they've admitted, is something that we've reported, is something that is just very obvious. But they, in that moment, it took probably days until they understood collectively as an organization, the leading people, the people making those decisions, to really understand the gravity of how a fan base was going to react to it, how, the sporting universe was going to react to it. And it was very clear from that moment that was never understood.
I think like one of the things that I really noticed from the Luka trade is like, and I think why Mavs fans had such a hard time with it among many reasons is like Mavs fans went from having like the most customer centric owner face Mark Cuban to like people leading the team who I just don't really think they cared about what the customer thought, you know? I mean, they're like, we think this is the right thing and like we don't care. And it's like you have to make hard decisions sometimes when you're in leadership, and like they had their reasons for doing that. You know, I don't agree with all of them, but like I just don't think there is any like regard for like this is what our customer, our fan base thinks, you know? It's like you at least have to be cognizant of that and like understand their perspective. And I don't think they did or tried to.
It was just such a shift, obviously. You know, it was such a shift going from Cuban to Dumont and from Donnie to Nico and, you know, all this stuff. Christian, going back like more than 10 years, or I guess about 10 years ago, you and I wrote a little blog together called Mavs Outsider Report way back in the day. And so, you know, I don't know if you would ever consider yourself to have been a Mavs fan, or were you?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. My senior year of high school, they won the championship. Like great time of my
nice.
life.
Okay. Yeah. So then, you know, you grow up watching Dirk. And so like many other Mavs fans, like we kind of get this sort of maybe just a premonition or just a dream that Luka will be the next Dirk, that we got 21 more years coming and all that stuff. And like, that is just not apparent to people that weren't here for the Dirk stuff. And none of these guys were. I mean, J-Kid was in a different capacity, but Nico.
Yeah,
and
that's why he
Dumont
looks so
were,
nervous.
Yeah,
yeah. As the body language expert.
Yeah. But like that sort of stuff is just, I don't know. It's just not apparent, you know, and maybe not even the case for Mavs fans that came along later, you know, that weren't here for Dirk. Like it was just such a different, like this is a very unique town to trade a star from.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they knew what the inscription was on Dirk's statue? Like, that's a genuine question.
Probably not.
Yeah. It feels like it feels like a piece of information you should know. Like you should know like basic details about the history of the team. And that doesn't mean, you know, that has to be your guiding light or your North Star. You know, like Nico still has to do what he thinks is right. And, you know, I mean, but I just don't feel like there was even like an understanding of basic history of the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear the reaction would have been different following the trade, the handling of it, the PR, the way that they talked about it, the way that they went into, you know, like if you grasped what Dirk meant and then realized that the fan base viewed through the Mavericks' own pushing of this, like the Mavericks were instrumental in branding Luka as the next Dirk. This was something they did constantly as a franchise, as a messaging, and like as they should. And yes, that's more, you know, a lot of way that's the digital and the communications team. You know, that is the way it's pushed. But you know, the people in charge also talked about the comparisons between Dirk and Luka. And yeah, that if you know if the people making the decision had grasped that, it would have been funeral vibes, and it would have been very different.
Like empathy for your fan base. You know,
Exactly.
even if you don't, you're like, we had to make this decision. It was a very difficult decision. There was not empathy for the fan base, and like that was what needed to be communicated in my mind, like right after it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, unlike, you know, I think strictly from a basketball perspective, we can talk about the trade and, you know, whether it was good or bad and what lessons they applied to future trades or whatever, like evaluated as a business move. This was sort of different. Obviously, there are a lot more layers to it than just simplifying it to that extent. But, you know, since that trade, they really have followed it. Like, it is very clear that is the vision. You know, like, there have been moves made since then that only further solidify that, like, this is exactly what the Mavs want to do. Now, that isn't to say that you have to, like, commend them for the vision or anything if you disagree with it. Like, I don't necessarily agree with the roster plan, but, like, they certainly believe in the plan that they're going with. You know, it's certainly a bold one, you know, and it is kind of zigging while the rest of the league is zagging. But I mean, there is reason to believe that it could work. Obviously, so much of that hinges on Kyrie coming back soon and quickly and everything. But I mean, do you get that vibe too? Like they said that they're all in to win a title, and it really does feel like they're all in because everyone's contracts line up. Like, it really does seem like this is it. This year and next year is it.
Yeah, I mean, Kyrie and AD, 2 more years on the contracts, and then they've got player options that third year. I mean, Nico Harrison, Tim was in the meetings like, I got 3 years left of my deal. You know, I think when you look at, like, you know, a lot of the key players involved here, it kind of lines up on a 3-year window. You know, I mean, the best players in this team are approaching their mid-30s. I mean, the time is now. And, you know, look, I didn't agree with the Luka trade. I think Donnie Nelson said, when you have a great player, you just go with that guy as long as you can until he says it's done. Like, I think I believe that, but like, I still think this team would have been very good and they would be in that contender discussion if Kyrie hadn't gotten hurt. Like, I really do like this team a lot if Kyrie doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, there's teams zigging, there's teams zagging, and then the Mavs are like zegging. I don't know. It's like some third secret option.
You got the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, you know, the story I wrote about two bigs, we talked about it last week, I think, and you know, even though there are a lot of teams committing to two centers, both teams that won the conference's last regular season were teams that started two centers, two big men. You know, players you look at and objectively, you know, Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, those are all centers. Yes, they can play next to each other, but they are centers. But even then, you know, when you know, as I've you know, did in that piece, and I kind of tallied up all the 3-point attempts and the drives, you know, like Dallas is last on that list in terms of how much offensive uniqueness or you know, offensive modernity that these bigs have in terms of like, this is the new NBA, this is skill ball. You know, these guys shoot threes and they, you know, with a live dribble, they get to the rim 25 feet away. Dallas doesn't really have that. You know, they're pivoting even further than a lot of these teams that are pivoting to two centers. They're pivoting almost to a older version of what the NBA was. And maybe they're ahead of it, you know, maybe, and Anthony Davis is very unique. I don't mean to say he isn't.
He's like Lively, a once in a generation, once in a lifetime kind of player.
100%. And Derek Lively is, you know, also you know, as we've discussed, a lot of his injury problems come from the fact that he has a very unique body and athleticism and can do very unique, or, you know, we think that there's probably a correlation between the fact that, you know, he is you know, he's 7'2" and can guard point guards. Like, there is a lot of uniqueness to that. You know, it's not to say there isn't, but then you know, especially on the offensive end, you just look at the raw stats and like, these guys are not unique in the way that a lot of these two center combos, some of them teams are planning to use them a lot less. They're just planning for the optionality of having two centers they can throw out there. That's what Houston is doing. That's what, you know, Memphis to some extent is doing, because I wouldn't consider like Santi Aldama to be a center. You know, he's a big, but he's not a center. So Zach Edey is going to be out there sometimes next to Jaren Jackson, but sometimes they're going to go smaller. Sometimes it's going to be Jaren Jackson alone as the 5. And what Dallas is doing is just fully committing to big ball all the time with a trio of centers that are just not the same type of modernity. Like, this is the brand new era of basketball. It's very interesting. I think it's noble in the sense that Nico Harrison believes this is the right way to play basketball, or he believes this is his preferred way to play basketball, and he believes it can win. And they are committing to it. There are not a lot of teams committing quite like them to this exact approach. But Nico Harrison says, no, I want to do it my way in every possible way. And in the sense that he just believes in his basketball ethics and believes in his worldview, I do respect that. It's just I'm still not convinced I agree with the vision itself.
It was a bold move on the floor and an even bolder one off the floor, and we'll continue talking about it probably for the rest of our lives.